This episode of UK Low Carb Podcast is sponsored by Deliciously Guilt-Free. Enjoy the show.
I am so delighted that I get to welcome back my good friend Pauline Cox back to UK Low Carb. And we now have a weekly series called The Pillars of Health. Each week, Pauline will dispel the misconception that if we eat well, then we're healthy. We'll explore together bad lifestyle habits, the stresses of life, poor sleep, lack of exercise, sedentary lifestyle, poor gut health, and poor liver function, and see how these can cause chronic illness and fatigue. The pillars of health are those key areas that we can take control over to live a happier and healthier life. And if you would like to engage in this conversation as we go through each week, then you may through our Facebook group, UK Low Carb. Now over to Pauline to tell us more. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Tuesday episode of UK Low Carb. And you probably know the person I'm speaking to today very well by now because she's been on the podcast a few times. I'm joined today by Pauline Cox, and Pauline is, well, I don't want to introduce you. You can introduce yourself because you've got many different strings to your bow, haven't you? Hi, Pauline.
Hi, Dan. Thank you. Well, I have many interests, and one of those being a real science nerd. By training, I'm a healthcare professional and was for many years before jumping into create this online store, well, actually high street and online store, which is So and Arrow. And now just continuing my obsession with learning, I teach and work with one-to-one individuals. So I have written a book, which again was a kind of a tick in the box for me. One of my to-dos.
Keep going. Here we go. There you go. That's it. Primal. So Pauline Cox, Living in a Modern World. Sorry, yeah, that's the full title, isn't it? Primal, Living in a Modern World. And it's a fantastic book. And then Pauline came on the podcast, I think it was in June time, maybe May, June, to tell your story. But then you also came back as well to join us for the big conversation, the epic show with Tim Noakes and the Unwins, which is incredible. And I said to Pauline, right, this is the way I run this show, basically. I want to learn stuff. So I ask my friends and the more educated people than I am to come on and teach me stuff. And I said, Pauline, please come and help. And so you've put together a whole series for us, which is really exciting. And that is The Pillars of Health. So do you want to just give us a bit of an introduction to what they are and then how we're going to go from there?
Yeah, the Pillars of Health, Dan, it's loosely based around this misconception that if we eat well, then we are healthy. And that coming from a nutritionist might sound a little bit at odds with what you'd expect. However, we can't eat our way out of bad lifestyle habits. We can't mitigate against the stresses of life and poor sleep and lack of exercise, sedentary lifestyle, poor gut health, poor liver function. We can't just eat a healthy diet and expect our health to be optimal. So the Pillars of Health is really about looking at the key areas that we can take control over and work on daily habits to support these areas that really make a difference to our day-to-day health and our day-to-day life, our energy, our feelings of self-worth and self-confidence, how well we absorb and utilize those nutrients, whether we're experiencing bloating or headaches. It is these key areas that make that fundamental difference to our experience of life.
Fantastic. And can I just say, this is what I think is so important. Sometimes you can hear this stuff, you can read it in books, you can find it on a podcast like this one, and you can think, well, that's all very well for that person, but I'm living a busy life, and and I haven't got the time to be sat around doing yoga all day, and but actually this is for real people like us who have got busy lives, and you, just like me, are incredibly busy, aren't you? So this is how to live a healthy life, but a sustainable one.
Absolutely. And it's really about how to find benefit with no extra time. So, what we can do in our day-to-day lives that really makes a difference to our health and well-being without, as you say, spending 3 hours in the kitchen or 2 hours in the gym or, spending a fortune on food and the best supplements. These are simple strategies that we can all start to incorporate into our life. And, steps, it's a spectrum at the end of the day. And our health is constantly evolving. And as we master certain elements of these habits, then you can kind of start to progress to the next level and constantly asking yourself, great, this is going well. What else can I do? And these small little changes that we can start to incorporate, every week or every month or however it works for you guys, that's the best approach, because that makes it so much more sustainable than doing everything in one go.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So let's kick off then with our first episode today. So what do you want to talk about today then, Pauline?
Well, we're breaking these pillars down into, broadly speaking, nutrition, sleep, stress, which is incredibly important, and movement. So we're going to take nutrition and split that into 3 categories, because nutrition is a very large subject to cover in one episode. So in this episode, under nutrition, we're going to start looking at the type of fuel that we use for burning. So this is Low Carb UK. As you know, I'm a huge advocate of the low carb way of life and utilizing fat for fuel. So we're really going to be looking at why fat for fuel and why low carb living is such a beneficial way of eating, and why that lifestyle is very congruent with our physiology as humans.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And this is going back millions of years, right? So it's about understanding how we work, which I find fascinating. So go for it then, Pauline. Tell us what you got.
Okay, well, essentially, Dan, we are dual fuel burners. And I like that term a lot because it really helps to kind of encapsulate us as humans and why we were able to evolve and survive as a species. And dual fuel burners essentially means that we can use glucose, or the breakdown of carbohydrates, for fuel, but we also have this amazing capacity to use fat for fuel. Mm-hmm. And this would have served as a huge advantage to us in our hunter-gatherer days, when food wasn't abundant like it is in modern life. We have food at our beck and call, too much food. It's just too convenient for us.
Way too convenient, yeah. Especially buying cheese. It can be very expensive, Pauline, I hear. There's a story that I'll tell people later. Carry on.
And so it's this ability to burn 2 types of fuel that has given us this evolutionary advantage. However, sadly, it's also kind of captured us into this state of sugar burning in our modern lives, which really the fuel you consume the most of is the fuel you'll tend to predominantly burn. And so there's an awful lot of people out there who struggle with weight, who struggle with body composition, who struggle with energy, blood sugar highs and lows, food cravings, sugar cravings, food addiction, mood issues, dizziness, and all of these issues that are related to constantly having their blood sugars up and down and fueling themselves essentially a high sugar diet. And so they never really access that fat burning machinery that we have, that sees our body being able to store a source of fuel on our body and then utilize it and access it at any time, which allows us to go for really long periods of time without getting hunger spikes, without getting cravings, feeling mentally alert and having clear thoughts, and feeling really good, as opposed to just feeling terrible when you're a sugar burner and you haven't eaten for maybe even 2-3 hours.
Yeah, which, I mean, I'm sure you've had the same as me. We're actually recording this now just before midday, and I think it's fair to say you probably haven't eaten as yet. I know I haven't eaten as yet. And people who have had breakfast at like 7 o'clock this morning might have had a bowl of cereal. By 11, so an hour ago, they are starving hungry. And when you're fat burning, you're just not hungry, are you?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of people who start the idea of fasting from the idea of a sugar burner, they find it incredibly difficult to realize that you don't feel the same hunger. It's a very different experience when you're a fat burner.
Definitely. And I think people have this fear of giving up something that brings them a lot of comfort and something they really enjoy.
Yeah.
And when you're not in such a great place anyway, you might be feeling tired and lacking in energy, lacking in motivation. Your nutrients might not be so great. You might not be feeling great about your body composition. The thought of giving up something that gives you a lot of comfort and joy in your life is just another form of pain. So really it's about starting to understand that little shift in maybe even what you're eating in the morning, and then maybe starting to slowly shift that meal, that 8 o'clock, that 7 o'clock breakfast. So it's what you eat and when you eat in the morning that really helps you to become this fat burner. And actually, our bodies are very good at training themselves to release hunger hormones at predictable times. It's almost like the Pavlov experiments where you get the bell ringing and the dog salivates. Our body is exactly the same in that we've trained our body with the eating times to release hunger hormones at very predictable periods throughout the day. So we may not even be hungry at 7 o'clock in the morning, but because we're getting this spike of ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, our body is dutifully eating because it believes we're hungry. Now, ghrelin spikes take about it takes about a day to shift it 45 minutes across. So over the space of about 5 days, you can shift your hunger spike across from, say, 7, 7:45, 8:30, until you get to sort of 12 o'clock over a period of about a week.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
So it's actually like a physiological thing, a chemistry thing going on, but you can actually shift that chemistry slightly day by day by 45 minutes. I did not know that. Wow.
And even easing that transition by what you're eating and having some, maybe some quality protein, a bit of healthier fats, rather than, as you mentioned, the cereals and the sugary carbs that a lot of people tend to habitually eat in the morning. Having these foods that keep your blood sugars nice and stable, so you're not getting those big peaks and then the dips in blood sugar, which really drive us to turn to eat more of the same sorts of foods.
Yeah. Now, the thing I also find interesting is, and I think the hybrid car example is very good for this. So if you've got a hybrid car, most people who've got hybrid cars know that the electric part of the car can only get you so far. It can only get you started pretty much or drive you around the block a few times. But imagine that's your body, and effectively you're then stopping to charge up the battery every sort of 3-4 times a day to keep running that electric part, when you've got a massive great tank of petrol or gas in the States that you're not burning and it's just sat there and you can't use it because you're using the electric. That is the same here, right? So if we think about the electric part being like your short-term energy to get you started, and then the fuel tank can probably take you 300 miles or so. In terms of fat burning versus sugar burning, how long roughly is it until we kind of use up the sugar resources? How long could we live, for instance, if I had a massive sugary meal, how long do you think I'd go until I'd start feeling a bit ill and I need to eat again, compared to if I had a big fatty steak? Would it be until I kind of had does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's a really great question, because let's assume for a minute we're just sugar burners. We would probably survive about 7, maybe 10 days on sugar, on glucose, through burning our muscle tissue. We'd get to maybe day 2, day 3, our body would start to break down muscle, and that protein would be converted into glucose to use for fuel. And at about day 7 to maybe day 10, depending on your sort of starting size, you would starve to death. Now, because we have this ability to use fat for fuel, and that fat can be broken down and accessed by the body into fatty acids and then ketones, we have a capacity to survive, depending again on your starting size, your BMI, 40 to 60 days. I mean, there's records of some people going significantly longer than that. If you have access to water, now you need water, you will die very quickly without water. However, this inbuilt ability to store and carry our own source of fuel, and then use it very easily, access it as and when we need it, would have been absolutely essential for our survival during those scarce times of seeking out food. Now, in our modern day lives, we're consuming the foods that are encouraged to be stored as fat on our body. And we have approximately, a slender individual would have about 100 to 150,000 calories worth of fat to burn for fuel. We have about 1,500, maybe 2,000 calories worth of stored glucose in the form of glycogen on our bodies. Now, when we initially start restricting what we're eating, or having sort of windows for eating and having windows of non-eating, so intermittent fasting and fasting periods, the body will initially use up the glycogen. So it'll use that source of emergency fuel that's stored in the liver, stored in the muscles, and that will predictably, in most people, you need about 14 hours to use up that glycogen. So after about 14 hours, you start to access your fat for fuel. Now, that figure, that time frame will change depending on a number of factors: your age, your activity level. For example, if you're going for a morning jog and you you're still in your fasted state, you're going to probably access your fat reserves quicker than if you were just, sat around reading the paper in the morning and you're still doing your 14 hours. So there are certain factors, your insulin sensitivity, your age, your health status, whether you have any, underlying health issues like diabetes or, if you have any systemic inflammation. So there are a few factors that will influence that time slot. However, predictably, it's about 14 hours of fasting will see your glycogen levels drop to the point where your body will then start accessing the fat stored on your body for fuel. But the problem is a lot of people don't go 14 hours without eating. And that's why we tend to carry this amazing reserve of fuel on us, but we're constantly adding to it and never really accessing it to burn.
Well, I'm really glad you said that, because I want to go into what's actually happening inside the person, if that's okay. So you just said about glycogen. So I just want to say, from my understanding, so you're eating sugar and carbs, your body's turning that into a fuel source, which is glycogen in your muscles and your liver, and it's being stored there, to be used up whenever it can be used up. However, let's talk about the other side of the coin now. So say, for instance, I've gone through the 14 hours through a fast, or maybe by going a bit stricter on ketosis, and now I'm at the stage where I don't, I'm eating just fats, really. What's happening inside me? What's the difference at the sort of the chemistry inside my body?
Well, that's a great question. And a lot of people are always curious about this state of ketosis. And, this is called the ketogenic diet. So there's a spectrum, first of all. Let's just break this down a bit more. So you can have a low carb diet, but then you can also have a ketogenic diet. And the two can be very similar, but they can also look quite different. So when you go low carb, you're encouraging your blood sugars to remain more stable, and it allows your body to access fat burning easier because your insulin levels become more stable, and insulin is a fat storing hormone. So we really want to keep our insulin levels nice and stable. Now, if you take it a step further and start having these windows of eating where you have these windows of fasting, and then during those windows of eating, you're eating a higher fat diet and a really quite restricted carb and quality protein, then you will find that your body enters this state of ketosis. Now, ketosis is where you have this baseline level of ketones circulating in your body. Mm-hmm. Now, people are always asking, if I eat this, will it knock me out of ketosis? If I put collagen in my fat coffee in the morning, will it knock me out of ketosis? And it's a really good question, because, we want to know what's going to impact that state that we're encouraging our body to be in. But the reality is it totally depends on the individual. So if you, Dan, were to have, an extra scoop of collagen in your fat drink, or have, a small grape at one point during the day, so it's a little tiny spike of sugar, then if your insulin sensitivity is really good and you're quite active and generally your body, you've been following this lifestyle for quite a while, then you'll find that your body deals with that little spike of sugar very quickly, and very promptly you get back into ketosis. Ketosis is almost like a fire that you're tending to. So at the beginning, the kindling goes out really easily. It's easy to blow out. But the longer that fire's been burning, the more easily you can stay in that state of ketosis, so that more readily you can become this fat burning. You're fat adapted, and you are much more able to take, a day of carbs or have a slightly higher carb content meal, and then quickly revert back into that state of fat burning.
I just realized something. Right. I'm going to confession time. I'm Catholic. So, confession is something I do easily. And I remember, so last week, the weekend before, I was in Bath, which is not a million miles away from you. It was Besma's 40th, his Besma's birthday, and we were going away for the weekend. And we did have, we started drinking a bit more because it is a party weekend, and we had a great time. But I did start eating a few more carbs. And then from the Monday I came back, I said, "That's it. This is last week. Clean slate. I'm going to get," and I did actually talk to you at the time about MCT oil, because I was thinking about using MCT oil. I'm now going down to pretty much, yesterday is 1 meal a day, but pretty much 2 meals a day, some cheese in there, steak, some eggs, and that's about it really. And I had some bacon yesterday. But I found that quite easy. Whereas in the past, I found having carbohydrate and then going off the carbs, I felt really hungry afterwards. Whereas I didn't feel that this time. And I'm wondering, maybe it's because I generally am kind of carnivore most of the time, that I'm just switching back into it a lot quicker than I would have done maybe a few years ago when I first learned about this.
Yes. And that's absolutely the case with individuals who've been doing this for quite a number of years or even months. They'll find that their gut health changes, which I know is an episode we're going to talk about in itself. Their liver function changes, which is, again, incredibly important for blood sugars and for bile production and breaking down of fats. And all of the key systems within the body are functioning so well that it's almost like you're in your hunter-gatherer days. You come across a big bush of delicious sweet berries and you're gorging on these berries. And, you know, your physiology is dealing with that situation. And then it's quickly creating this state of homeostasis again. Whereas when we're chronic carb consumers, that's really when the body becomes overwhelmed with, you know, we start to get insulin resistance. We start to get our blood sugar start to creep up. It impacts our liver as we start to get fatty liver deposits. Our mitochondrial function, which are the little organelles within our cells that produce the ATP, the currency of energy, become dysfunctional. And so we find that we're trying to get this energy that we need. We're getting systemic inflammation. We're eating more to gain energy, but it's not working. And we end up just finding we're getting heavier, we're gaining more weight, we're getting more lethargic, and it's this downward spiral.
Yeah,
so
and actually, one thing I found interesting, the last week was that I suddenly realized yesterday I was eating too much fat because I was getting, reflux and thinking this is uncomfortable. And I thought, hang on, maybe this is my body's way of saying you don't need to eat quite so much. You've got enough on your body to burn, actually. Just eat to satiety and then stop. And then you'll be fine. And then just let your fat stores get used as fuel.
Absolutely, Dan. And I think that's a key mistake that people make when they go keto initially. And I'm going to term it dirty keto because, really it's not about just eating fat. We really want to be conscious of the types of fat we eat, anti-inflammatory versus inflammatory. We want to be conscious of our individual health goals as well. So if you're someone who might have a chronic condition such as type 2 diabetes or an autoimmune condition, or you're just someone who's already pretty healthy but you want to get healthier, then we want to be looking at the type of food we're putting in and whether that macronutrient profile works for you. So for some people, a really high fat diet just wouldn't suit them because their liver can't deal with it. They might have had a history of drinking quite a lot of alcohol or having quite a high toxic load through medication or environmental toxins. They might have had a really high sugar, high carb diet. So they have a lot of fat within their liver. And so they just can't handle that heavy fat load. And as you rightly pointed out as well, they have adequate stores of fat on the body, and we want to be encouraging that fat. So whilst you don't want a low-calorie diet and to really restrict the amount of food you eat, you certainly want to be seeing your plate and looking at it and going, wow, I have lots of fermented, colourful vegetables, quality protein, and some healthy fat, not just a big plate of, fat, lard, bacon, cheese. And, it's about really focusing on the systems. And this is why we're going to be talking in the next episode about gut health, because feeding your microbiome is exceptionally important for whether you are struggling with resistant weight or whether you have that slim microbiome profile as well. And what you eat has a huge impact on that.
And I think understand the gut. I can't wait to get into the episode because I know there's so much research that's being done into that at the moment. Guys, ask a last question for today, though. And I just want to find out about, so I said I came back from Bath and I was able to kind of slip into this quite quickly. However, some people listening might be listening for the first time to any low carb keto type podcast or this might be their first experience. And for that person, what are the sort of steps to get started to help that person to really think, right, I do want to change from being a sugar burner to a fat burner? What would you say would be your top tips to get them into it?
I think that's a great question, Dan, because as I mentioned earlier, I think people tend to want to do all or nothing at all. And with this, recognizing, first of all, that it's a lifestyle, it's not a diet. This is a way of working with your physiology and making friends with your physiology, because we tend to fight it so much, particularly as women. We beat ourselves up when we're trying so hard to lose weight and we're jogging every day and we're like, why is my body not changing shape? So firstly, it's accepting that this is a lifestyle approach. So be really patient. Then I think just get yourself organized, clear out your cupboards. So if you can't see it, it's not a temptation. It's out of sight, out of mind. If you really want to stop the jammy dodgers, get them out the house. So clear out your fridge, clear out your store cupboards, and start thinking about what you can replace your favorite foods with, the things that you just fear giving up. There's people break out in a cold sweat when you talk about giving up bread, but there are so many fantastic alternatives out there to your wheat, high carb, gut damaging breads, such as seed breads and really low carb, healthy gut promoting breads that honestly just don't taste any different to regular breads. So finding your amazing health promoting alternatives and really planning out. So make sure if I have a sandwich that I take to work every day, or I make myself a packed lunch, plan it out. Get your keto buns, your keto rolls, get your delicious sauerkrauts and things that are really going to be helping support your gut health, and also that are going to make you feel full. And you're also going to enjoy them, because I think it's so key that you enjoy this way of life. It would be miserable to feel like, oh, I'm never going to enjoy my food again. I can assure you, I absolutely never feel deprived of food. There is a huge range of wonderful, delicious foods available that are health promoting and add to health rather than taking away.
And actually, that's the key word. You just said lifestyle. I just want to say that is so the key word. If you're doing a diet, then you've got a limited amount of time to go through the suffering of the diet. So you think, I'll eat the Rivita and dust because I've got to get through this, and that's it. However, you're saying a lifestyle where you're going to make the change for the rest of your life. So you've got to have a lifestyle that's sustainable, that's enjoyable. Absolutely.
And find those products that you love. We all have the things that we grew up with, or kind of always gone, Cadbury's caramel or cream eggs or whatever it is that floats your boat. Find something that initially might not taste just like it. Your palate changes, and accept that. It's a good thing. And as you embrace darker chocolate, take it up a notch. Go from 73 to 85 to 90. And if you can get to the really dark, go for 100. But find those empowering alternatives, because that's really what's going to help keep you on track.
Totally agree.
And get excited about it. Find recipes from your regular cookery books and ketify them. So make your favorite egg fried rice, but make it with cauli rice, or find your favorite curry and have it with cauli rice instead of rice. Find your favorite Italian dish and make it with either courgette or one of these low carb pastas. There are so many ways you can get inspired by the current things that you already have, your regular cookery books or online recipes and websites and communities that make this an exciting journey. So you're changing the language in your head from, oh, I have to give up, or, oh my gosh, this is going to be difficult, to this is a new journey. This is exciting. I can't wait to get started.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what? It's interesting for me. I've been thinking about this recently. My grandfather was born in 1908, so he was quite an old man, older man when he had my dad. And my dad's only in his 60s now. But I think about his diet and I think about my grandfather's diet, and actually their diet was much more based on meat and vegetables with some potatoes probably. And what I realized with my generation is going to university, I don't know if it's the same for you, but pasta was just like every meal. And rice was every meal. It was like, and I think we went ultra carby, which is interesting. Yeah. And I think when you start stepping back from your food, and after a few years of doing this, you go, whoa, what was I eating? Well, that's crazy. Like there wasn't no nutrition in that whatsoever. It was just giving me these massive highs. And I think you're right about your food. You kind of look at food differently and realize what actual nutrition is. And then you start saying, and it's like Chris Rooney said on this show, and I think it's so true. You go from saying I can't have to I don't want. And that really is an empowering thing where you realize you're not missing out on anything. You just don't want it anymore. And actually you're liberated because you're now eating what is good for you and actually you're enjoying as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that language it's really key to a sustainable change, that I choose not to. And I might look at that meal and go, that looks pretty good. That pizza looks tempting. Well, it's not even tempting. It looks good, but I choose to have this instead because I know there's this, I agree with you what you said as students, you load up on the pasta and sauce because it's cheap and it's fuel.
Yeah.
You get to a point when you're in your life where your body just can't get away with that anymore. It's under too much stress, toxic stress and physiological stress where something gives. And it might even happen at a younger age now because kids are exposed to so much sugar and processed foods. that it might be happening younger and younger. So kids might be getting fatty liver, which is happening, and diabetes, or they might be getting depression and anxiety and skin issues and joint pains and, these food allergies. And so, whilst we as students might have been able to get away with it, so to speak, it wasn't long for me personally anyway. And that was in my mid-20s when I couldn't get away with it any longer.
It catches up with you pretty quick. Yeah,
it really does. Yeah.
I wish I had to wait until mid-20s. By like week 3 of university, I was in trouble. That and beer together was not a good combination, let's just say. As we finish today, I suddenly just want to ask something to do with that transition period. Keto flu is something that comes up a lot, isn't it? Because people say, and of course it depends on how you change your diet. You might just go lower carb and you'd be fine, but some people do actually get quite ill feeling. And I know I did when I went quite strict keto from being a carb burner. Aranda, who's been on the show, he went even further. He went from being a full carb eating, American and Western diet eating person to fasting for like extended periods and really hit the brick wall. So can you just talk about what's the best way to manage something like keto flu if you do get that?
Yeah, I think what's really important is when you start this journey, particularly if you go full into it, you lose a lot of water. Your body, your muscles particularly release a lot of water. That puffiness that you often see on people who are eating.
On Monday last week on my face. Yeah, I had that in the mirror, Pauline. Yeah. All right, carry on.
It really is, isn't it? It's evident. So we release a lot of water, and we also lose a lot of electrolytes. So it's important that you're hydrating, really hydrate. The other thing to note here, Dan, is when we become fat burners, fat is a perfect place for our body to store excess toxins. So we will store heavy metals, we will store all sorts of toxicity from our environment, from our food. And then when you start liberating that fat for burning as fuel, these toxins are literally swimming around in your system and can cause migraines, skin breakouts, rashes, all sorts of things. It can make you feel pretty terrible. So hydrating helps to flush out these excess toxins. And adding in the electrolytes really can help to, it can help the body to function as it should. So getting your magnesium in, calcium, potassium, get those minerals in so that your body is more able to deal with that change. And these are very key nutrients anyway. Electrolytes are really important for any individual to have, in particularly magnesium. We tend to be chronically depleted in magnesium.
Wow. And then I would say that's what I need to go and get. Yeah, I need to go and get that because I've had in the past just like Himalayan pink salt, but I think magnesium is one of the things I've sometimes missed out on.
Magnesium. We are chronically deficient in magnesium, Dan, and one of the reasons being is for every sugar molecule that we have, we need 52 magnesium molecules to process it. So sugar hugely depletes magnesium.
I didn't know
Stress hugely depletes magnesium, and magnesium is a key mineral for improving insulin sensitivity. So as your blood sugars creep up, your magnesium levels deplete. We don't get a huge amount of magnesium in our diets because our soils are very depleted. So it's this everything's stacked against magnesium. The body's using it constantly. We're burning through it at a really high rate when we're stressed, when we have a pretty high sugar diet, or if you have insulin resistance, and then we're not getting so much into our diet because of depleted soils. And then we have to actually absorb the minerals. We actually have to access the magnesium, which we're going to talk about in our next episode when it comes to gut health.
Well, there you go. Wow. Mind blown there. Incredible. So we're going to be back next Tuesday for our next part, which is about the liver and gut health and, how all this sort of stuff works inside the body. I can't wait to get into that. Thank you so much, Pauline, for that amazing session. I hope that everyone agrees that it's going to be incredible and what a journey to go on. And if you've got any questions, we want to be part of the conversation. We do have a Facebook group, UK Low Carb. And you can then, I don't know if you remember that, Pauline. If you're not, please join. And I'm sure you can ask Pauline anything you might have, but also share your stories and tips as well, because we're a community and it's all about helping each other. Have a great week, Pauline. And I will see you next week where we'll talk about gut health.
Thanks, Dan.